We've got Jude Ilo, who is the head at OSIWA, Open Society Initiative for West Africa. He joins us from Abuja. Good morning, Jude, and thank you for coming on today. Well, yeah, for some people it's over. For others, not over. They're still going to have sleepless nights because some of them have been declared inconclusive and some others, the electoral process suspended in Rivers, for instance. Well, yeah, you've been keeping tabs on the entire process. What's your latest reading of the process?
Thank you, Chamberlain, for having me. I will start by saying that, unfortunately, I think Nigeria has consolidated its position as a counterfeit democracy. Because what has happened between the presidential and governorship election, in my view, is really, really sad. We would have assumed we've turned the corner in 2015, that some of the things we are seeing now are not possible, but unfortunately, we are seeing an election that was badly run. Participants who did everything within their powers to undermine the election. We've seen security agencies who went into the field and went into the arena also, being used by politicians to undermine the democratic process. We've had stories of INEC officials being kidnapped, INEC officials being forced under duress to sign off on results. I think as a country, we should be collectively ashamed of what has happened in these elections. I also think that what is important at this point is to, one, tell ourselves the truth that this has not gone well. If anything, this is an unfortunate example of retrogression from where we should be. But then make an effort to ensure that all the people who are complicit in undermining this democracy, in this rascality that we've seen across the country, are punished. I think it is really, really important. And for us, for me, and for a lot of members of the civil society, the first place to start is an independent inquiry into this election, starting from the process of procurement to the announcement of polls. It is important that we don't leave any stone unturned to understand clearly where did we go wrong, to understand who are the people responsible, which institutions are responsible for what has gone wrong, and then make an effort as a country to collectively address these challenges and, of course, punish those who are culpable.
You know, when you speak about starting from the process of procurement up until announcement of results, but when the chairman did say that we needed to have a conversation about election management in this country if we need to move forward, don't you think, looking at it from that procurement, is going to be a lot more broad-based? Are we likely to get it sorted before the next elections?
My point is, you can't start midway. We have to start from the beginning. Because we had a situation of logistic failure that led to the postponement of polls. And this involved, of course, the movement of polling materials, the purchase of polling materials. So I think it has to start from the beginning. Now, people should not construe this to mean that, you know, we're looking to apportion blames or anything, but I think it's important that we understand exactly what went wrong. I mean, Chamberlain, we should all be worried that a country that has practiced democracy for almost 20 years is having this kind of elections. That we're in a situation where we lost more than 50 people just because we went to polls. At the presidential election, it happened. At the governorship election, it happened. We should be worried that our INEC officials are not safe. We should be worried that our recs are living in fear. We should be worried that our politicians have become so reckless. You know, the impunity is out of the roof, that people can do whatever. So like I said, it is a counterfeit democracy because all the institutions that support democracy are progressively being undermined. We see that happen with the removal of the CJN, clearly against the dictates of our constitution. We see that happen with the intimidation of INEC officials.
Two or three things.
An INEC commissioner's house
was
broken into.
I'm just wondering, we'll come back to that, about that entry, but shouldn't it be, in terms of the multi-layer approach that some have suggested, should we just focus on the electoral process, or we should also have a look at our democratic system, something the transactional nature of our democracy may be the root cause of this challenge. If everybody wants to win because the winner gets all the perks of office, and then even if you get 49% to someone who got 15-1, you leave with nothing after spending all that amount of money in running elections, which is, quite a task. So something we should also have a look at that while looking at the electoral process. Do you subscribe to that?
Chamberlain, I totally agree with you, but I think there has to be a starting point, and the departure point, in my view, should be the elections. And from there, we begin to expand the scope of that conversation. I do agree that the political culture in the country is quite bad. I totally agree with that. I also do agree that even the Nigerian people oftentimes condone some of these excesses. This whole theory that power belongs to God and it doesn't matter how you get it, or we all have to respect you for having power. So we've got a problem. It's multi-layered, it's multifaceted, but for me, there has to be a starting point. And the starting point is that we invested billions of naira in an election that, in my view, has come out not credible. At the beginning of this election, civil society groups came together and issued a threshold document talking about the minimum requirement for a credible election. They talked about independence of INEC, they talked about integrity of the polls, and they talked about the non-partisanship of security agencies. They talked about transparency. All of this has not checked out. It has not checked out. And so we've got a problem. So we should start from there. And when we begin to ask those questions, then we can find out the other external factors that contributed to having this kind of embarrassing outing in the polls.
When you talk about the election, I think we should demystify the entire thing, because it's a very big thing when we talk just elections. There are several processes. There is one we talked about the other time with the two legal practitioners, the vote casting, vote counting, and vote collation. At which of these points, the crucial one is the counting. The crucial ones are the counting and the collation after the casting of the ballots. How did we fare at those two levels?
Thank you. Let me take it back a little. Bit, because what actually happens is that a lot of this rigging, a lot of this undermining of the process, it happened before the polls. And so it could also be misleading for us to focus on the voting and the counting. You ask yourself some fundamental questions. There were places in this country where there was violence before or during the election. And because of that violence, elections were cancelled. They did not even hold in those places. The question we should start asking ourselves, who is the beneficiary of this violence? Who would have benefited from disruption of polls in these places? The question we should ask ourselves, how were permanent voters' cards distributed? Were the places where people were intentionally stopped from getting their voters' card, or it was made difficult for them to get their voters' card? Were the places where communities collected voters' card? Were the places where it was impossible for INEC officials to ensure that people who were registered were actually eligible to vote? These are some of the things that happened before polls, and our inquiry and interrogation should also look at that, because in some instances, elections are already won or lost at this level. And then you come to the polls. Usually, we don't see a lot of malpractices on the day of the poll. That is, I'm talking about people going to vote and leaving. You may not see a lot of it. But I think also it's important for us to ask INEC to make available to the Nigerian people the breakdown and the analysis of the card reader data. How many Nigerians were accredited fully? How many Nigerians were accredited partially? And in which place or in what places do we see this happen? Is there a trend? Because from the reports we're getting from our own observers, it does appear that in some parts of the country, in some states in the country, more than 50 to 70% of the voters did not go through full accreditation. These are important questions to ask because the answer will help us understand the pattern of manipulation of the electoral process. But everybody will agree that the collation process has become the weakest link in our election. It's become the weakest link. In the last governorship election, we had numerous reports of observers being refused entry into places where collations are happening. We've seen INEC officials admit on national TV that they amended figures. So I don't think this is just a problem of one part of the process. I think it is a total and unfortunate failure of the system with respect to conducting elections in the country.